Okay, you've got a business, you've got contracts, but what about the lawyer? What do we do? What do you need to know to make a contract without a lawyer? Well, stay tuned here on the Six Figure Mastermind, and we're going to tell you everything you need. Okay, so you're in business for yourself and you need to make a contract, but you don't want to pay legal fees and you don't want to pay a lawyer to do it. You want to, budget all of your resources and your time and just get your contract out the door without having to wait for lawyer approval. So there's a lot of ways to do it, and most of them are perfectly legal, moral, and ethical. So if you really feel like, and now I have to say, disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer, guys. I've never studied law, never have, and I don't think I ever will. But there are things that sometimes you don't need a lawyer for that you can really just go for it and do it without. And contracts is one of those things. Contracts just need a certain element. And if you watch any of our other YouTube videos, we're going to outline those elements for you so you know exactly what needs to be involved in a contract and what doesn't. So your contract doesn't always have to have a lawyer's name on it to be a valid contract. In order for the contract to stand up at court, it doesn't need a lawyer's name on it either. Okay, you can get a lawyer if by chance your contract needs to go to court. The only thing that will make your contract legally binding, basically it breaks down to this. It breaks down to two parties having all of their information, like contact info, like name and email and phone number and address and all of their contract information. It also needs to have details of the transaction. You don't need a lawyer for that. You're the ones making the transaction. You know how much your programs cost. You know how much your programs cover. You know what you do and you won't do. And you know what your client is responsible for. As long as all of that is spelled out and written in the contract, you don't even need like the these and thous and thises and that's of legalese to do your contract without a lawyer. As long as your contract is signed and dated, you've both got copies of it, and those signatures are in place, and both of you, I like to have a physical copy and a digital copy. Those are valid. Those, you don't need a lawyer for those. So to think that you need a lawyer for a contract, not necessarily true. Now, what you may need a lawyer for is to uphold your contract. Let's say that you're in business for yourself and your contract gets called into question. Either your client calls it into question or you call into question, and maybe there wasn't a provision made within your contract for what you're specifically dealing with. Maybe your client is late with their payments and you don't have a way to get through that. You don't have a way to deal with that, and you do, but it's not included in your contract. That's when you might have to take that contract into the courtroom, and that's where things can get a little bit dicey. And again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have any legal history at all. But what I do know is what is in black and white print on paper is the only thing you have to work out in court, unless you have evidence otherwise. Meaning that if you had an addendum to your contract, it needs to be in a typed, printable, or emailed fashion, something that you can show to the judge. If you have a vocal contract, in order for that to be valid in court, it needs to be recorded, and you need to have proof of that. The courtroom's all about proof. You don't need a lawyer for a contract. You don't need a lawyer even in court, even though, you might want to have one. Again, I can't offer legal advice, but you can represent yourself. And you don't need a lawyer for your contract to be completed either. You don't need one to compose it. You don't need one to complete it. You just need to have your contract elements in place. Those contract elements include contact information for both you and the person that you're in contract with. And if you're in contract with more than two people, have everyone on there. Everyone gets to be included. And be aware of this too. If your contract is between you and another person, and that other person has a spouse, unless that spouse is named in the contract does not include the spouse. So this is just between you and that other person, whoever is specifically named in the contract. If it's a business, it's just you or your business and that other business entity. So you've got to have all your parties' information. You've got to have all of the terms outlined, and you'll learn over time what makes a good contract and what your business needs. You may find, like me, my contracts, seriously, for my photography business used to be a half sheet of paper until I started getting burned here and there, and not in a bad way. I just started learning things. I learned that, my clients would take my photography and add different filters on it. And so I was like, oh my gosh, That is so like not, I can't put my name on that because it's not mine anymore and the filter does not look great. So I added an addendum to my contracts from that point forward that said no filters. And then I had to say no cropping. And then I finally just said cannot alter or filter or crop in any way, shape, or form. I finally learned my lesson and put that in there. And then I learned over time about what it meant to have travel expenses covered and what it meant to have food expenses covered and what it meant to have all of those things covered. So guys, Google is your best friend here. When you're developing your contract, we went from lawyer to Google, right? Like, oh, do I need a lawyer? No, you just need Google. So go to Google, find contracts that are relevant to your business and relevant to what you do. Read through them, and I mean line by line. You've got to put on your Oracle hat for a minute and just read through everything line by line by line by line by line if you're using it in your contract. And then you make sure that you've got all of that lined up. It all fits your business. It all works for you. It all works for your client. You have your exit strategies covered. And then you're good to go. If you need to bring a lawyer into it, it probably won't be until a later date. And my guess is that you could mediate with your client before it got to that point. But you don't need a lawyer to make a contract. All you need is all the information written, spelled out, black and white. Are you surprised? Like, it's really not that hard, you know, and you might be surprised on how much you can do on your business on your own and how simple and easy it is in every arena. So leave a comment below. I'd love to hear back from you on what you're doing in your business that you find success in and that you find joy in and why you stepped into entrepreneurship. That's the whole idea of being a six-figure mastermind. I want to hear from you guys. Give me a subscribe and I'll see you tomorrow.